All right. Hello,
Right.
everyone, and welcome to the Jazz Education Station. I'm your host, Ryan Ashworth, and today's guest that I'm excited to have on the show is Ashby Anderson. Ashby is a composer, an arranger, a jazz educator, and performer in numerous forms. And so, rather than take up any time talking about it, I think I'll open up the floor so Ashby can tell us a little bit about how he's involved in the jazz education, arranging performance world, and so forth. How's it
All
going,
right.
Ashby?
It's going great, man. Well, of course, currently, I'm, composing music for the BMI Jazz Workshop in New York. Of course, we
Awesome.
started off the year, correct? And then we get into this part of the year. We've got the shutdown. So we're doing a lot of the COVID shutdown, COVID-19 shutdown. So we're doing everything remotely each week, even with the recording, big band
Wow.
recordings, people recording in their homes and then, putting it all together. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting time, On the education end, man, of course, I have the Motus mobile study and training, uh, where I think you've been on uh, workshop. And before that, I was the artistic director for the Richmond Youth Jazz Guild in Richmond, Virginia, and that was a private music school for young musicians, 6 to 18.
Yeah. And so I know, that was one way that you actually even hit my radar is I think I saw an ad that you put out about this Motus harmony system that you came up
Yeah,
with. And the way that it hit me was I saw this ad that it was you saying, hey, I have this unique harmonic system that you can use for composition that's not taught
right,
in any college,
right.
university, what was the other word? Other institution.
Yeah, just college or university. Right,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
Hmm.
And so I thought, wow, this is fascinating, So I reached out, and what you shared during that sort of class that you hosted online was just really mind-boggling, and it caught me at a time where I had so much going on musically that I didn't really get to digest it, but it
Yeah.
it really stuck
Hmm.
with me. And so maybe we could start by, rather than getting into those questions that I sent you, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, because I feel like that's something that people could take a lot from, just talking about your 9-tone harmony system.
Okay, well, man, this is just through composing music. As a composer, we're always looking for ways to generate material or to substitute chords. That's one of the favorite things jazz musicians like to do is to have a way to rearrange the tune and to make it as flexible as possible. And for me, I was big into the diminished scale kind of concept, and I was very curious about how it's able to support so many different scales and chords. Why does it do that? And what I found out is why it does that is because it with within that scale it has a structure of what we call a tritone and a perfect fourth, or a perfect fourth and a tritone. And these intervals repeat themselves at minor third intervals on modes 2, 4, 6, and 8. And those intervals are major intervals that we use to construct the kind of hip type of gritty chords that have been popular since the 1950s and 60s. Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, those type of chords that musicians play in the left hand. And so I was interested in finding out how I can use that over any chord. How do I equate the diminished scale and make sure that it goes with the proper chord? And that was kind of how I stumbled upon it. And then I found out the only system that I could not sub with that method was the augmented system. You know what I mean? And we were taught this kind of unique scale, minor third and a half step scale, the augmented scale. Okay, not the only augmented scale. The whole tone scale is also an augmented scale. But we were taught that unique scale, And I could not find a way to substitute using my method because the scale didn't have a tritone in it. And so when I
Mm.
added a tritone, it ended up creating this 9-tone scale. And then I was like, oh, wow, this is really unique. What's in this? What does this do? And that's kind of how I got started. But, that's it in a nutshell. It gets kind of complex. As you can say, it takes a while to digest. But that's basically, the method and the concept. It's just taking a 9-tone scale and doing the great stuff that we already do with 7-tone and 8-tone scale.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, it's so cool. So where, if, as we kind of progress through this, obviously we're going to let folks know where they can find out more about what you have going on and where they might be able to reach out to you. But where could folks,
Mm-hmm.
if what you've said so far piques somebody's interest, where would they go right now to start to learn more about this 9-tone method that you teach?
Oh, man, they go to www.music.nyc/home, HOME. And that would take them directly to that page, or they can go to www.music.nyc, and that'll take them to another page where they can get a free video of kind of an overview of the method.
Nice. And if they wanted to continue to learn further, do you offer private instruction, something
Right.
along
Well,
those lines?
what we have now is the online portal, and you register for that. It costs about $45 a month, and we work on it. As a group, and we'll have a private Facebook page where people can put up the different work that they do, and it has 12 modules that are progressive. Get progressively difficult, and students or participants have exercises that they have to complete, composition, different exercises on there, and videos and PDFs. So that's kind of the method that we're doing. It's available on all platforms: phones, tablets, Macs, iPads, etc.
Really cool stuff.
Yeah,
I feel like that's such the way of the future for music education.
no
As
doubt.
far as these kind of like subscription sites where you can go in, focus tunnel vision on something that you're wanting to work on, and just pay a subscription the same way that anybody would to a magazine or anything like that. So
Right, right, man. That's the future. That's where it
pretty
is.
cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, I think we'll probably touch on more of this stuff as I kind of get into these questions that I sent you. So if you don't mind, you want to jump into kind of like our
Yeah,
5
yeah.
prepared
Let's
questions?
get into some of the great stuff you're going to ask me, man. Yeah,
All right.
ready.
All right. So that first question that I have for you is, so what are some current trends that you're noticing in jazz education, or maybe that you've noticed in the last 5 years that you feel like might be worth talking about?
Oh well, one of them we just talked about is that just the kind of switch where we're using these devices as conduits between the student and the teacher. We're no longer just limited to in-person classes. Like I said, you're in Chicago right now, um, and we're communicating over these devices, and students are learning that way. And I kind of saw that coming about as the technology was getting better and better, maybe for the past 5 years, and all of a sudden we're like, bam, we're just thrust into this new era where now we don't have any other way at the moment while we're waiting to move forward into a pre-COVID-19 society or post-COVID-19 society. So that's one of the things that was definitely the trend. We're using it right now.
Right. Just oops, lost my light there.
Huh?
Just like you said, one thing that stood out to me, I was teaching private lessons in Philadelphia from like 2007 to
Right.
2011. That's how I made a living. And that
Mhm.
was kind of right on the coattail of YouTube coming out.
Right.
The more and more I started to find that the content that my students were after was available on YouTube.
Available on YouTube.
and that they were ultimately just coming to a private teacher because that was the way that they were used to learning, and that's probably the picture that they had in their mind in terms of
Right.
how you learn in today's world. And as I saw that YouTube was going to be a really powerful tool in terms of learning, that was one thing that really kind of spurred me to get my education certificate, was seeing that in order to continue to be a music educator and to be relevant, the only way to kind of really make that something that could continue to be a career outside of exclusively online teaching would be some sort of music education position.
Right. Right. No question, man. I mean, ability to learn anytime, where, on is almost like education on demand.
Right. And that's the way that the world is. The world is moving in that direction. The entire world is moving in an on demand. Your groceries are now on demand on your phone.
Right.
Somebody will drop them at your door.
Right.
Amazon on demand, same day. They tell you now that we're located centrally in metropolitan areas. Same day. You want that today? You got it on demand.
Right.
We're moving in a direction where that's just going to be it's going to get exponentially like that. So yeah.
Right. And so I think once people are getting used to that, they're like, well, I don't want to be on a particular, schedule. Like even when we finish with this, you'll be able to post this online and people can get it anytime they want. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, in the afternoon, 24 hours a day, access, to information of your choosing, what people are choosing to learn, what they decide that they're interested in. And, I find that very intriguing, man. It's a great time, that we're in right now, for communication. Yeah.
It really is, especially in terms of liberating, the monopoly on information kind of held by institutions has just been completely removed. I think that a lot of gatekeepers have been kind of moved out of that position. And so a lot of things are wide open,
No question.
It's almost like nobody really is in your way at this point except you.
Right. I'm just plugging in, make sure we keep all our connections happening. But yeah, man, that's where we are. It has removed a lot of gatekeepers, and it's allowed us as musicians to move into, much many more facets of our, careers. Especially as educators, as purveyors of information. We're able now. Not only are we, musicians, but we're also, like you said, man, we're podcasters. We're where at one time the job of the musician was just to perform. Now we're the engineers. We have our own studios in our homes, in our houses, man. We can produce a recording from a room like this and have it all over the world through DistroKid the next day for $20. This is, man, it's unprecedented, the time that we're in with what we have available now.
Couldn't agree more. I think it's a really exciting time. I think that often it's debatable about positives and negatives, but I try to focus on really just the sheer amount of opportunity, as long as you kind of recognize and just like you said, podcasting. How cool is it to have a passion about jazz education? Right. And then have a tool that allows me to reach out to so many people who have expertise in that, and then share that knowledge with people, just based on a little bit of a drive to have an entrepreneurial spirit, so to speak.
Right. And as well as just to communicate, man. We have sometimes, man, we're just so busy. And what you find out, man, a lot of people are just so much more accessible now. They're not as busy, so people are like, man, I'd love, like when you call, I was like, man, I'd love to do this podcast.
Right,
Can't wait to do it, Dan, this is a great idea. This is awesome. Let's do it, and so I was like, I looked at it, I was like, it was inspiring to see you said, hey, this is what I'm getting ready to do. What do you think about this? And man, hey, I'd like to have you on as a guest. And I was like, man, that's what I'm talking about. That's the entrepreneurial spirit. That's getting out there and making the best out of a bad situation.
Exactly. Yep. And that's one thing that I'm really trying to kind of exemplify in my role as a public school teacher right now with this
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19 crisis is,
Right.
we really have two options in any situation. We can either make the best of the situation, or we can complain about it and it's not going to do any good. So, I really am trying to be a leader and a role model, and be proactive and focus
Mm-hmm.
on things that I want to do at the time, and be positive. So,
Right. And man, you've got a very positive role. I don't know if I told you, but yeah, I taught public schools for, 9 years. Before I did my own thing, I was a band director, um, elementary, middle and
mhm.
high school. I did all those levels there. But yeah, man, you got a very important role, and a different role, is going to come about. So these skills are going to be very helpful. You know.
Awesome. Well, it's not uncommon for most people's answer to that have something to do with the internet and the way that the internet is starting to shape music education and jazz
Right.
education. So
Right.
cool. All right. So the second question I have for you, and this is a tough one, but if you
Okay.
could only listen to 5 jazz albums for the rest of your life, which 5 albums would you choose? And maybe give us a little insight as to why you chose those.
Man, I had Ray Brown Trio, and the pianist that was with him was uh, uh, Gene Harris, and that was one of the first recordings where I was really paying attention to piano, and I was like, "Wow, I'd like to sound like Gene Harris." You know what I mean? I'd like to figure out how he's getting that sound. So that would be one of them. Second one would definitely be John Coltrane's "Love Supreme." In Search for the New Land by uh, 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 Lee Morgan. Moaning by Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, definitely a favorite. And let me see, probably, let me see, did I list one of those? Oh, Monk's Big Band and Quartet in concert. Definitely got to have that if I only got 5.
I saw a brief documentary on that that Monk big band concert, and I
Yeah.
think he had what was it? Who did he have on trumpet that night? Was it Freddie Hubbard or something like
Well, it
that?
depends. This is the one right here. So he did several of them, but this is
Okay,
the album I'm talking about. And Charlie Ross was on tenor, but we had
always.
Thad Jones on cornet, Nick Travis on trumpet
Ah,
on this particular album. You know,
gotcha.
but he may have had Freddie Hubbard. I'm not sure. I'd have to check.
There,
I'd have to look at who's on that other album.
there was a story about some night the trumpet player for one of Monk's big bands. The trumpet player was showing up late for rehearsals, and they said, "Hey, man, if you don't get it together, we're going to replace you, and we're going to do it with this young kid named Lee Morgan."
Oh wow!
That's the story that I heard, and that the trumpet player kind of got it together after that.
Right, right. Man,
So,
yeah, Lee was something else. Lee was bad at a very young age.
okay, look,
Yes,
I
sir.
was living in Philadelphia when I discovered Lee Morgan. I was living in
Mhm.
West Philadelphia, and I think I probably got introduced to Lee Morgan with like the Sidewinder album or the Rump Roller or something like that.
Right, right,
One of those ones that hit like
right.
that mainstream radio. But as
Yeah.
I dug in and realized what a monster he was, he's hands down my favorite trumpet player. I like Clifford Brown, but Lee Morgan is just something really, really special to me personally.
Yeah, no, definitely one of the greats that definitely left us too early. But man, what a legacy he
Yeah,
left, man. We're still unraveling it, all these years later,
right. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, those are all great albums, and I'm actually surprised because I'm familiar with, a lot of people have been spouting off some obscure stuff that I'm not familiar with. So I knew most of those.
Right. Yeah, definitely, man. Those are some,
As a matter of
some
fact,
good albums.
I listened to my son. We were doing some online homework this morning, and I listened to "A Love Supreme" with my son
Uh-huh.
while he did math homework.
Right.
So yeah, it's a good
Oh,
one.
wow. Okay, okay. Man, yeah, that A Love Supreme album, man, is very calming. I don't know what it is, just got that vibe about it, man. Every time you put it on, it just, you know.
And there's something as you kind of get into the album. The reason that I even thought to listen to it is because are you familiar with that tenor saxophone player Chad LB?
Uh,
Chad Lefkowitz
New,
Brown or something
is
like that.
he new young fella?
Yeah,
Maybe this
he
straight.
has a real nice hair,
Yeah,
good beard.
I know who you're
You know what I'm talking
talking
about?
about. Uh-huh,
All right,
I
all
know
right,
you're talking. I've seen him on Instagram, and yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So he did a little master class on pentatonics and used a
Okay.
Coltrane tune as a Coltrane tune to illustrate that this pentatonics concept. And the Coltrane tune that he used was like Resolution, I think, or
Right.
something off of that Love
Mm-hmm.
Supreme album. And so there's a lot of stuff that is happening musically on that album. When you pick it apart, it's pretty sophisticated.
Very much, man. Like I said, I'm going to probably delve a little bit more into it while we've got this time and go through and do a little bit more analyzation of it, not just the listening part, but just the kind of appreciation of the structure that you kind of feel is there, but you might not necessarily have a lot of time to delve into it, always.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I hear you. Right on, man. Well, next question that I have for you is some do's and don'ts of transcribing. Maybe some tips that you have for folks, because it's such a broad topic that a lot of people
Right.
say, you want to do this and not this, but then somebody else is going to tell you different. So what do you think about it?
Well, I think personally we should be doing more transcribing now, right? I've ran into a great new tool. Of course, we've got several versions of that, but I was actually looking for, I think, Capo, but I ran into something else. Let me show you. It's called Light Audio Stretch. And man, this thing is so, lets you slow down as much as you want without you being able to lose the pitch. And man, you catching all of the ghost notes and everything. And in terms of transcriptions, I would just say, as a use these tools, slow it down so that you're not kind of filling in the note. You actually hear that note, you're playing it at the piano, you're listening and you're matching and making sure, because sometimes the tones, depending on the instrument or depending on how it was recorded, might be in the middle, a quarter tone somewhere, and you have to make a decision. But most of the stuff I've done recently, man, it's like these tools have really It made me want to do more transcribing because it's so easy. Because not only do you don't have to just have the tune. You could go to YouTube and just screen record the part that you're trying to learn, and it'll put the video in there. So then you can watch the guy that you're playing and look at the transcription, as well as hear and write it out at the same time. So I find I like that more because I'm able to watch the player. And if I can't get a note, if I'm looking at what his hands are doing, I can see like, oh, I see he did a little flick right there, which means he's putting his thumb down somewhere. What with my hand in that position, what note would that be? You know what I mean? If it's a hard note to find.
Oh man, that's for me personally. I use a software called the Amazing Slowdowner whenever I'm slowing
Okay.
stuff down.
Wow.
But it's really amazing to me, Ashby, that just like you said, we have this software. Have you ever been in a lesson or in a musical interaction where and I'm sure every musician hearing this is going to relate. You're in a situation where you say, "Hey man, can you slow that down for a sec?
Right.
I need to slow that down. Play that a little slower. Let me see what
Right.
you're doing,
Right.
man."
Right.
We
Right.
literally have the opportunity to ask Charlie Parker to slow down.
Right.
Hey, will you
Slow
slow
it
that
down.
down
Right.
so I can figure out what you're doing?
Right.
and on repeat. This software that I use, the Amazing Slowdowner, you can, just like
Right.
you said,
Right.
I
You
can
can
take a
get
little
right.
chunk,
You
it
can take
loops
it
it.
to and put it in a
Give
loop.
yourself a
Right.
little
Right.
wiggle room so that you
Right.
can play the loop, give yourself a little breath, jump
Yeah.
back in, right?
Yeah. I do the same thing. That's what I'm saying is look how easy it is now with these tools for us to learn, which means we should be better musicians now because of all that we have access to.
Right. So you know what's funny, Ashby, and maybe us talking about this is going to tie into a conversation that we'll probably hear in a different episode from
Mhm.
somebody else. But I mentioned that whenever I first got that software and I realized the power, I was like, oh, I can slow anybody down, right? So I
Right.
can figure anything out. So I take this blistering Joe Pass solo off of his album Catch Me.
Hmm.
He's playing Just Friends, but not only is he playing Just Friends, the key of the recording is different than at the time. I had to rely on the Real Book or like the iReal Pro. iReal Pro didn't even exist at this time. So I had to rely on the
Right.
Real Book. So I'm learning this Joe Pass solo. It takes me about a year, all right, working incredibly hard. Every day I chipped away at this solo and I would slow it down, get it under my fingers, write it down, and then kind of progress through. And at the end of the year, I could play it with the recording at tempo, right?
Wow.
Eh, Well, I felt good. I felt good about myself because I could play it along with the recording at tempo. But I realized, and I realized this because somebody said, okay, man, if you keep that momentum at the end of that solo, can you maintain that momentum whenever you start soloing on your own? And I
Oh, right,
realized,
right, right.
it
Yeah.
would be if I were playing with Joe Pass and then immediately it would just crash and
Right,
burn, right?
right,
So I
right.
found myself at a loss really for how to use that transcription. And I think that that's one thing that a lot of people who are approaching transcription without maybe some proper pointers, they say, okay, I'm going to transcribe Coltrane, right? So maybe you have no business transcribing Coltrane. You need to start to transcribe something that's going to be a little bit more digestible. But approaching that, what are some ways that if you get a little bit of work done, a little transcription, how could you squeeze the most out of that? What could you do to make sure that you're actually going to put it to use and not just sound like the person that you transcribed?
Well, two things. Usually for transcriptions, my goal is a little different. Like for transcription, my goal is generally not to try and play the person's solo, verbatim. I'm generally interested there. Did he stick to the chord changes of the tune, or did he deviate? Did he how did he resolve his notes? So I'm looking for other things. I'm more so when I'm transcribing, I'm more trying to understand the player's personality. Okay, so that things that I do, these are some things that maybe I need to start to add into my own toolbox for my solos. And so I would begin to say, well, okay, I like this device that he had, or I like that device, and whatever device maybe had a certain way that he cascaded through a chord arpeggio. So I'll have maybe bits, things that I like that I will take and begin to integrate into my bag of music knowledge. And over a period of time, that filters into my playing. But I've never been a person that actually plays a person's solo, something that I did a lot of. I would do it to learn it, to see how he got the sound, like Gene Harris. But then I'm more interested in how do I execute that, like you said, myself without the solo. You know what I mean? Without trying to play his solo verbatim. But generally, I just use the devices that I find within the solo, things that I like.
And that's I think the realization that you either come to or you have somebody explain to you is that the idea maybe isn't that I mean, yes, you want to work toward being able to play the entire solo, perhaps.
Right.
Maybe that's not your main diet of
Right.
transcription.
If that's your goal, that's cool. But that's not the only thing you can do for with the transcription. Playing them is one thing, and then like you said, learning the the knowledge that's in it is another aspect. And different people, like I say, they find different ways. So I just kind of lean toward that. But I love seeing people, like I heard a guy play Miles Davis solo on So What today, on Instagram. He played the whole thing, and he was right there with Miles. You could hear both of the horns together, and it was just a beautiful sound to hear him match Miles's thing note for note, man. I mean, it's just very respectful to see that. You know what I mean? And so I enjoy watching players do that.
Yeah, it can be a pretty insightful task, especially if you take it to that next step. Once you've worked hard and you figured out the notes and you're able to play along, to then take
Right.
the time to digest it bit by bit and try to find little parts that make the solo unique. And just like you said, find the musician's personality so that you can kind of start to cop that rather than thinking about all of the notes.
Right. Right. Okay. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
Cool, man. I guess that leads
Okay.
us into our next question
Yeah.
that I have for you, which is, what are you practicing these days?
Man, believe it or not, giant steps. It's never been a tune that for me wasn't really one of my favorite tunes, because it's just different. Um, it's very repetitive. Uh, but I just said, when you listen to McCoy Tyner play that tune solo on piano at a blistering tempo, and it's so fast that he can't even tap or count with his foot. Man, it's like amazing. You know what I mean? So I've been shedding on that a lot lately and developing different approaches and transcribing how Kenny Kirkland, he does one of my most favorite solos over that. I've been transcribing his solo, looking at different approaches that he uses, integrating that into my own playing, and then building up the endurance to execute it. Ultimately, it's just a great tune to practice and to measure yourself by, and to get your thinking faster to be able to execute at the tempo that's required for this tune. So I start slow and I work up.
Absolutely. Yeah, that tune's a booger for sure.
Oh yes, sir. No doubt about it, man. No doubt about it.
You always hear that horror story of oh, what's his name on the original recording, that piano, Tommy Flanagan, I think it was, that played
Yeah,
on the.
yeah.
And so I guess he got the music to Giant Steps, and he thought that the tune was going to be played at a different tempo.
Right.
And that was that, since Coltrane had really been working on that, was kind of like just a chord kind of matrix that he was working on. So he came in ready to blister, and Tommy Flanagan clearly did not come prepared to play at that tempo.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, but he still killed it. He still killed
Yeah.
it though. Yeah. Yeah. Considering, man, he still sounds, in my opinion, pretty flawless, man. The lines and the chords. It's like, wow, man. It's pretty intimate.
Especially, you also have to take into consideration anybody who's ever had to. You're kind of on deck after somebody's just killing, and imagine you're on deck after you hear Coltrane come blistering through Giant Steps, and now it's your turn to solo. And not only that, but you're cooking, and you weren't prepared to.
Right. Right. Man,
So
yeah. So yeah, you can tell that is one of the things when you listen to the tune, man. It's just amazing just to hear how prepared. Train just was so prepared for that tune.
oh yeah,
Just the aggressiveness that he's on there, and it is a complete difference when you hear Tommy Flanagan's approach. His approach is more subdued, but when you get into the '90s and you got somebody like Kenny Kirkton that has digested all of these years and people's approaches, and you hear how he's matching that type of aggressiveness on the piano, it's like, wow, man, this is amazing, you know. And like I said, if you ever get a chance to check that video out, check him out with uh, Kenny Garrett. Kenny
Okay.
Garrett. There's several on YouTube, several videos of them on YouTube, and it's
We'll make sure
amazing.
that we post a link to that below with all of the other
Yeah,
links that we're going to be posting.
mm,
Any videos that we mentioned that are on YouTube, we'll be
right,
sure that we
cool.
post a
And
link
I'll
to
find them
below.
and DM it to you, so that you got
Perfect.
the one that I'm thinking about.
Perfect. Awesome. Awesome, Ashby. Well, after that, one of the final kind of prepared questions that I have for you is, who are some of kind of like your jazz heroes, or who are some of the people who really inspired you to not only get involved in this music, but maybe to become a composer and to really stick with it and start to make this your career?
Man, I'd have to say, man, I had uh, a great teacher when I attended Morehouse College by the name of Rod Smith. And I wasn't a music major at the time. I kind of expressed my interest in music, what I was working on, and I took him my demo tape. And he actually just kind of took me under his wing, gave me a key to the practice room. I wasn't an actual music student. He arranged for me to get piano lessons from Joe Jennings at Spelman College, and that which was just across the street. And people like that, man. What he taught me really inspired me to really uh, learn to play, as well as um, you know the way he kind of showed me the culture of the music from a community point of view. Not only was he a teacher, but he would take me out to jam sessions, or I'd go out to see him play. And I just learned just from just hanging around him. And a lot of that is just the traditional way that jazz is taught. It was more of a community kind of education. Um, but of course, it's in the universities now. So he kind of had a combination of both. He had the university and he had the street. And, I love keeping those two together.
I had a conversation with Joe Albano, who is an
Mm-hmm.
alto saxophonist. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to pause for
Mm-hmm.
1 second.
All right.
Sorry about that. I
That's all right. Not
apologize.
a problem at all, man.
Yeah, so Joe Albano, he's
Mm-hmm.
a saxophonist based out of Boston, and
Right.
he said the same thing. Whenever we were talking about kind of trends in jazz education, he really stressed the importance of the mentor and the mentorship, and maybe
Right.
kind of the fading away of the mentorship, and the mentorship kind of becoming housed in the collegiate system, and
Right.
which is something that you just kind of touched on. You said that your mentor kind of had one foot in both worlds, and
Yeah.
so that's, I think that in order for the music to kind of have a safe place to continue to perpetuate, there was almost no choice but to enter kind of that world of academia, which is,
Right.
an interesting
Yeah.
conversation in and of itself. But
Right, definitely. But yeah, so but that in terms of composition, to continue on with your question, man, I just as I went in, I actually went and further, went as a music major and studied, and just you know hearing how a composer can write a piece of music and leave it, he's dead and gone, and people are still playing it. I was like, man, it's really important to write stuff down. It's really important to try to get the ideas out of your head and put them down, even if you're not going to use them right now, but try to record them, because you never know where that goes, after you're going. You can't take it with you, you know what I mean? So, I enjoy the process, man, of just creating a new work, listening to it, moving on to the next thing, and trying to write as much music as I can, and record as much music as I can.
I love that. Love that. So that kind of leads me, I guess, into my kind of question that you aren't prepared for, which is
Uh,
this BMI orchestra that you compose for. How
yeah.
did you get in? How did you get involved in that? What are some of the steps for maybe an aspiring composer who's seeking out big bands to play their pieces? In my experience, you start to see all of these published composers, and you think, gosh, how did that guy get a piece published? because I feel like I
Right.
could write something at that level and so on and so forth. How did you wind up getting involved with the BMI orchestra and composing for them?
Well, first I had done a couple of projects, myself. I was involved. When I first learned to play, the first band I played in was a jazz orchestra. So jazz orchestras were really how jazz was passed down from musician to musician anyway. It was a training ground, and so I trained in that, and so I have a great affinity for the sound. As I began to study more and more, and of course in my training, ran into having to write for uh, orchestra and how to harmonize horns and how to stack your chords, and had to study Thad Jones. And man, after studying Thad Jones and Count Basie, and then getting further into Duke Ellington, and just that sound, and just looking at the amount of work that it took to produce that, and all of the people that had to do it, I would at every chance I'd get, if at one time I had a very large rehearsal space called the Muse Creative Workspace, and it was about 7,000 square feet, and I ran that rehearsal space, a jazz loft, for 10 years, 11 years actually, 2006 to 2017. And so I sponsored orchestras. And what I would do for sponsoring the orchestra, when they had, free time, a little break, I bring my charts in, and I was kind of practicing with that. Then whenever I would get a chance to write a grant, if I could write a grant that would help me get the funds to organize an orchestra, I would do that. And then the opportunity, BMI offers every year new composers to come on board. All right. But you got to have your scores ready. All right. So you got to do the work ahead of time. You got to have those orchestral scores that you've done before you're trying to become a part of the orchestra. And you will submit those scores and tell them a little bit about yourself. And they will either invite you to become a member to compose for the orchestra, or you have to try again at a different time. So, I happen to have all of the scores from a project that I did in 2015, and I think it was like summer 2017. My wife said, "Hey, I saw this uh, ad on Twitter, or a post on Twitter from Ted Nash. Ted Nash plays with Jazz at Lincoln Center. He's the tenor saxophonist, and
Wow.
he's also one of the at different times he's a director with at that time with the BMI Jazz Orchestra, along with Andy Farber, who's also another saxophonist, great saxophonist in New York, with affiliations with Jazz and Lincoln Center. And he's the director of it, as well as uh, Alan Ferber, trombonist. Alan Ferber is also shares the director duties. So that's how I found out about it, from Twitter. Yeah, and submitted the scores, and they said, "Hey, come on and be a part of it." And I was like, "Man, this has really been a great experience."
Gotcha. That sounds cool. I studied,
Yeah,
I was really passionate about arranging and
right.
composing. In my undergrad, I had an opportunity to study with my jazz band director, who was a really good arranger. And then we also had to do some arranging stuff in grad school. And I really learned a lot about that. And in both of those experiences, as I was kind of coming up with my projects, composing and spending time, kind of like you were saying, creating the scores, I always wondered, wow, I wonder how people reach, how you kind of get your foot in the door for something like that. And I'm sure there are a lot
Right,
of
right.
composers
Hmm.
who are asking the same question. So that awesome.
Yeah, all kind of ways. The main thing, man, is put your energy in that direction first. That means put your energy in there, in that direction. Write your charts. Find an orchestra, or either assemble an orchestra. Assembling an orchestra, man, is a lot of work. A whole lot of work, man. If you're in a college situation and you got students that can play your work, man, that would be great. You know, but if you can find, just find connections, man. Make connections with people that can help you, or that they bands always need music. They get tired of playing the same stuff,
Sure.
Yeah. So if you can find somebody, man, you can just say, look, I got a charter. I got 16 bars. Can I get to get to your rehearsal, man? Can y'all try it out? Because 16 bars, man, if you got 16 bars, say you went to the rehearsal, you recorded 16 to 32 bars. All right. A lot of times for entering these types of things, whether that be a grant, they're just listening for a sample of the work. They didn't ask for the whole tune. They may say, look, just give us a minute. We're only going to listen to a minute. They're not saying that you have the whole tune. So you give them a minute if you got, and whatever charts you got. But it's best to try to, have a whole complete tune. But man, my thing is get everything that you can, record it, document it, even if it's just in small parts. And those become your work sample or that you use when people request it. You already have it ready. Have your scores in Finale. No handwritten scores. Have your stuff in Finale where it can be PDF, and have your MP3s of your work, and just be prepared is all the best thing, with everything.
Absolutely. Luck favors the prepared.
Right.
But with that said, let me ask you this, just being hypothetical
Preparation
here.
makes opportunity, Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
So let's say, you're a person and you're reaching out to a big band director, just to kind of put this into perspective for people,
Right.
so we could be a little bit more encouraging to people to not be so reluctant to reach out. Do you think that it would be too off-putting for a big band director or somebody who's in charge of a big band to receive an email from someone saying, hey, can I email you my chart? Could you run it down if you like it? Could you run it down and capture it on the phone and send me a recording of you guys running down my chart so I can hear how a band interprets what I have on paper? Do you think that most big band directors would be
Man,
open to that?
man, I don't know. I think it's the more seeds you put out there, the better. I've always been a person that I'm not really worried if somebody kind of feels off put, or if they're like, man, what did this guy just email? I really don't worry about stuff like that. Man, I reach out and I'm throwing seeds out as much as possible. I'm trying to get somewhere and I'm trying to get to something. If that person can help me get there, I'll try to have something. Look, this is what I'm offering. I may have my big idea too, right? I'm just reaching
Right.
out. Some people may be responding, and some people are like, man, what? It doesn't make a difference, man. Reach out, keep putting it out there, all right, until it starts coming back. The energy starts coming back. Like I said, before, I had a big band project that I got a grant to do. But before I did the grant, and I'm giving you actual facts, I had about, like what I'm telling you, I had about a minute, maybe 2 minutes worth of music that one of the bands that I sponsored played down, and it wasn't the whole tune, and I submitted that, okay, with the score, and and got the grant to record to actually do a much larger project of four, I think it was a 4-movement suite. um so that, man, just be prepared. We're always thinking it's the big thing, but it's like the little details, man. It's the small stuff. Take what you got and work with it. You know what I mean? Ask everybody. Sooner or later you'll run into the right person, or they can direct you to the right person.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice, and I'm
Yeah,
I'm glad we were able to kind of pull that out of you, because that's pretty encouraging for people to
yeah.
hear. So
Just have something put to offer. Offer them something like, man, you need some charts put into Finale or something, or whatever.
yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. If you approach somebody and you have something to give, you know,
Right,
always try to provide, always have. And what I like to say is that I want to have, like, in a 50-50 relationship, I want it to be like 60-40 my side,
right.
trying to provide more value.
Right. That's what you do, man. Always, man. Value first. Put value first, then it comes back around. So that's
100%.
like what you're doing now. You're putting together value today. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
You're putting it
Yes.
out there. I can already see it. When you talked, I was like, man, I already know what's about to happen. you know, the
Awesome.
logo. I was the
Yep.
logo of the. Oh man, I was like, look at it. I could see. You could see it. The energy was already there. So that's what you're trying to create, man. Whatever you're trying to do, just put the energy out there, lock into it, work on it bit by bit every day, man. And next thing you know, bam, you're there.
That's it. That's it.
All
All right.
right.
So those are Ashby. Those are the questions that I had prepared for you. I'm not sure how much more
Okay.
time you have left for us to kind of pick your brain.
Cool. Well, like I said, we can save some stuff for another one, man. We don't have to get it
Awesome.
all today.
Yeah. Hey. That sounds good to me. One more quick question, maybe before we start to wind down.
Definitely.
Are you familiar at all with George Russell's Lydian chromatics concept?
Yeah. I got probably some copies of papers and stuff. Yeah, I've delved into it a little bit. Mm-hmm.
So, does that relate in any way to this 9-tone system? Do you feel like you might be coming up with this, with
All
kind of
of
like the
these things, when you're looking at somebody else's vision, that's George Russell, that was his vision of how he perceived the 12-tone system. I can pull out another book. Joseph Schillinger is more of a person I study more than George Russell. Um, but I can look at his books and I can see his vision, his particular approach. The only similarities that I saw is that he kind of had a 9-tone order of tonal gravity that he was using in there, but it wasn't quite this same concept. But I think all of these things are very related. I think music is so big, man, and the theoretical applications are so big. We're just like, a person holding on to one part of a big elephant. And this is what my part feels like. Then this is what his part feels like. But there's so much in that, what you're holding, it's enough for everybody, So I think it's relative. I've looked at some of his stuff, man, and the thing that strikes me the most about his work is how articulate he was about his particular approach, how he actually articulated that. When I look at Schillinger, and we're talking at a time before computers, man. Imagine how much work had to have been done in order to actually produce these books that we're holding now. You know what I mean? That
right.
we can just talk into these computers and have some and just edit the typing. But during that time, they had to do it, the old way. So I have a lot of respect for it, man. But I love his concept, man. Love his concept.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a pretty profound one. I've got it back
Yeah.
here on my shelf somewhere.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I have to do a little digging in, man. Or maybe, like I said, man, you put together something and kind of put a shorthand way. Maybe I can better understand it. But yeah, love all. Yeah.
Still trying to wrap my head around some
His
of that
thing is
stuff.
making the 4 chord the 1 chord.
Right.
Pretty much.
Not only is
Right.
the 4 chord supposed to be the 1 chord, but that then it's
Right.
kind of based on the overtone series and the way that
Right.
notes exist in nature, and
Right.
having that raised fourth interval kind of be
Man.
a focal
Listen,
point based
man, I
on the way
looked at
that
it.
the
I said,
overtone.
man, this is hard. It's difficult to argue with. I mean, in my opinion, he proved his point. You know what I mean? We're just very oriented toward the major, the regular major scale, the way we look at it. But man, he has a very interesting concept where he's saying, I think that this is the actual 1 chord. I'm like, oh my goodness. You know what I mean? We just
man.
lower, all we do is just lower the 5th down one more step. And he's saying that that's really the final sounding chord that everything is produced from. That's deep.
That everything's trying to resolve to that home base.
Right. Whole concept,
But,
tonal gravity. Gravity. I mean, can you get with that, man? That's wow.
Yeah, man.
How he's saying there's this field of tonal energy that's trying to navigate to a particular point. I'm like, that was heavy, man.
then he starts talking about like the inmost going and outmost going,
Right.
all of
Man,
that. It's
man.
like,
I mean,
whew,
he went in. He went in. That's what I'm saying. He went in all
no
the way.
doubt.
You know what I'm saying? They said
And
he was in. I heard he was in the hospital for months, and he was sick, and that's when he was doing all of this work. So
wow,
he did a lot of thinking. This is a
yeah.
product of a person who did a lot of thinking about this concept. You know.
From what I understand, that really had a big impact on the birth of the modal movement and modal
Mm-hmm.
playing altogether. Was kind of George Russell coming up with that concept in conjunction with the time that he was hanging with Miles Davis. So
Oh
probably
yeah,
something to it.
no doubt about it, man. No doubt about it. So much to learn, so little time. You know.
No doubt. No doubt.
Hey.
Well, Ashby, I guess we've probably taken up almost enough of your time for the evening. I
Oh
really
man.
appreciate you joining us and talking about this. I'm sure people are going to really enjoy hearing what you have to say. But like we said earlier in the show, if anybody wants to learn more about uh, is it the Motus 9-tone system? Can you?
Well, it's just the 9-tone system of harmony and scale. I
Gotcha.
refer to it in various ways, but it's just for the layman, just a 9-tone system of harmony scales that's not taught in any college or university.
Awesome. And where again can we link up with you to learn more about that?
You can go to www.music.nyc, and on that page there's a link where you can get a free video about it, or you can, if you want to enroll in the subscribe to the online course, that's at www.music.nyc/home.
Perfect. And we'll post links below. So on
Yeah,
YouTube, we'll make sure that you
I'll
guys.
DM you some links and everything, so you have everything there.
Perfect.
Oh,
Perfect. Well, Ashby, again, we really appreciate you joining us this evening, and we look forward to talking to you again in the not too distant future.
definitely, man. My pleasure. I really appreciate you inviting me, man. Much success on the show.
Thank you very much. So until then, everyone, thank you for joining us. Once again, I'm Ryan Ashworth, your host. Our guest this evening was Ashby Anderson. This is the Jazz Education Station, and we'll see you all again next time.